If you can't handle me sleeping with your friends, then get out. They're the ones who inspire me. I happened to overhear my son-in-law say this to my daughter. My daughter smiled coldly and replied, "A man like you isn't worth it." The next morning, my daughter's 3 friends and her husband ended up in the emergency room with the same symptom. Then the doctor entered the room. "This is difficult to say, but your husband, I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please like it, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my revenge story from. I want to know how far it has reached." The night in Austin was colder than usual, a chill that crept through every crack in the window and wrapped around me like an unnameable warning. I walked slowly down the familiar street that led to my daughter, Clara's condo. In my hands, I carried a container of still warm food, smoked brisket, Clara's favorite dish since she was a little girl, which I had carefully cooked all afternoon. I hoped that this taste of home could soothe the invisible tensions I had been sensing in her lately. Clara never said it, but I'm her mother, and I know. Her gaze, the way she was slower to answer my texts, and those times she avoided the conversation when I asked about Julian, her husband. They were all broken pieces of a puzzle that foretold a storm. The door to the condo was slightly ajar, revealing a faint strip of light from within. I pushed it gently and froze as if someone had stopped me. Shouts were coming from the living room, each word like a shard of broken glass piercing the silence of the night. I stood motionless. The container of food suddenly felt heavy in my hands. Julian's voice, deep but sharp, shattered the air. "If you can't stand me sleeping with your friends, then get out. They actually inspire me." My heart stopped. I hid behind the kitchen door, holding my breath, and peeked through a crack. Julian was sprawled on the sofa, a glass of red wine balanced in his hand. He looked at Clara with contempt, with cruelty. He wasn't hiding. He didn't show the slightest remorse. Across from him, Clara stood tall, her chin trembling as if she were fighting to hold herself together. But her lips were curved into an icy smile. "A man like you isn't worth it," she answered, her voice low but sharp as a knife. I had never seen Clara like this, fragile and yet firm, like a candle flickering in the wind but still lit. On the coffee table, Julian's iPad lit up incessantly, with that venomous blue glow that seemed to mock the situation. I managed to read the name of the group chat on the screen: Chloe, Brooke, Maya. Familiar names, Clara's friends whom I had welcomed into my home, for whom I had cooked and laughed so many times. Now they appeared there, like a blatant accusation. Julian didn't even try to hide it. He scrolled through some messages, laughed scornfully, and then went upstairs as if nothing had happened, as if he had been talking about the weather. He left Clara alone, in a shattered living room, surrounded by the wreckage of the home she had believed in. Clara sank into a chair, her small shoulders trembling. Silent tears streamed down her cheeks, but she didn't let out a single sob. Through the veil of her tears, I saw that her gaze had changed. There was no longer fear or weakness, but something hardened, as if a spark had been ignited in her chest. I wanted to run and hug her, to tell her everything would be okay, but I didn't dare. I feared that any word of comfort would only deepen her wound. That night, Clara didn't say much. She silently packed a few things into light bags, a few changes of clothes, a navy blue dress she loved, and a small picture frame of the 2 of us when she was a child. When she put the bags in the trunk of my car, her voice was hoarse, dry from so much crying. "Mom, I'm home now." I didn't ask her anything else. I just squeezed her hand tightly and drove through the empty streets of Austin. Inside the car, no one spoke. Only the radio played an old song, the only sound breaking the heavy silence. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. Messages poured in one after another from acquaintances, words I couldn't believe. Julian, Chloe, Brooke, and Maya had been rushed to the emergency room presenting symptoms of genital warts. The rumor spread like wildfire, and soon all of Austin was in an uproar. I stood there, phone in hand, my head spinning. A part of me felt satisfied, as if fate had finally punished those who made my daughter suffer. But the larger part of me felt pain. Pain for her, for what she had to endure, and pain for myself, for being a mother who couldn't protect her. I took Clara to the hospital, where the hallway was chaotic with cameras and a curious crowd. The flashes wouldn't stop, as if trying to capture every second of the scandal. A doctor hurried out of the emergency room, whispered something to a nurse, and then turned to us. His voice sounded uncomfortable, as if he didn't want to say it. "Ma'am, we regret to inform you, your husband, due to unhealthy sexual practices, has been diagnosed with a high risk of genital warts. I think you should get checked as well." I looked at Clara, expecting some reaction, a cry, a gesture of denial, any sign of a breakdown, but she just smiled, a calm smile that sent a chill down my spine. "We haven't been intimate as a couple for a long time," she said in an even tone, as if she had rehearsed the response. I was by her side, squeezing her hand tightly, feeling her small fingers cling to mine. At that moment I knew, I had always known, that this day would come. But knowing it and seeing it with my own eyes were two very different things. That night I sat in my small living room, the yellow light illuminating the photos on the wall. Among them, an old picture of Clara when she was 5, wearing a white dress and holding a bouquet of daisies next to me in Zilker Park. My little girl's smile then shone like the sun, and I, a young mother, thought life would always be this kind. But now, seeing Clara asleep in her old bed, her eyes swollen from crying, I couldn't help but go back in my mind to the years that led us to this day. I am Eleanor. I am 67 years old, a widow, and I have lived in this city for over 20 years. And the story I'm telling you, the story of my revenge, is one of the scars I carved into my own heart. When my husband died more than 20 years ago, I felt my entire world collapse. He was my only support, and when he was gone, I was left with only Clara, my big-eyed girl, who looked at me as if I were her hero. To provide for her, I opened a small jewelry shop on the corner where I worked day and night. The sparkling stones, the intricately carved rings, it was all made from my sweat and tears. I never told anyone, but I also invested in land, buying small lots on the outskirts of Austin, which are now areas full of buildings and businesses. Thanks to that, I amassed over $4 million, though I never showed it off. To the neighbors, I was just Eleanor, the quiet widow who lived in the old house with potted succulents on the porch. Clara was my only light. She grew up sweet, with a heart as fragile as glass. She liked to sit by my side, listening to me tell fairy tales about eternal love, about princes and princesses who always found each other no matter the obstacles. I loved that she saw the world through rose-colored glasses, but sometimes I feared that her innocence would make her suffer. And then Julian appeared, like a whirlwind that swept through my daughter's world. I still remember the first time I met Julian, at Clara's birthday party at my house. He walked in, tall, handsome, with a self-assured smile that I knew was the reason he had hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram. He shook my hand, but the grip was shallow, as if he were doing it out of obligation. His eyes scanned my house, from the old painting on the wall to the worn wooden furniture, as if he were sizing everything up. "Your house is very cozy," he said, but his tone sounded forced. I smiled and nodded, but inside, a sense of unease was slowly creeping in. I had seen men like Julian before, guys who are always looking for something to take advantage of. When Clara announced she was marrying Julian, I tried to be happy for her. She was so overjoyed that her eyes sparkled as she talked about their future plans, her voice tinkling like silver bells. "Mom, he's the man I've always dreamed of," Clara told me, hugging me in the small kitchen. I stroked her hair, convincing myself that maybe I was worrying too much. Julian was a famous personal trainer with hundreds of thousands of followers. Surely he must be a good man, a strong shoulder for my daughter. I tried to believe it, but deep down, I knew I was fooling myself. After the wedding, Clara moved in with Julian to his luxury high-rise condo downtown. The first few months, I used to visit her often, bringing containers of food or the homemade apple pies she loved so much. Every time I went, I noticed Julian was more distant. He was busy with live streams, sponsorship deals, and lavish parties. Clara, on the other hand, was fading. She, who had been a promising fashion designer, now just wandered around the condo, taking care of Julian and preparing meals he hardly ever touched. I watched Clara's smile lose its shine, but every time I asked, she would just smile uncomfortably. "Mom, I'm fine. Julian is very busy, but he loves me." Clara's three best friends, Chloe, Brooke, and Maya, began to appear more and more in her life. Chloe, the owner of an elegant spa, always arrived in expensive clothes and a strong perfume. Brooke, a real estate agent, had a sharp voice and a gaze that never left Julian when she spoke to him. And Maya, a travel blogger with tens of thousands of followers, always found a way to take pictures with Julian, calling him a source of inspiration in her posts. I couldn't help but notice how Chloe's gaze lingered a little too long on Julian, how Brooke shamelessly praised him. "You're just the ideal type of man." Or Maya's suggestive jokes. "Clara, you're so lucky to have Julian." To me, those words were like sharp knives, but Clara would just smile, hug me, and say, "Mom, they're my best friends. Don't think badly of them." I wanted to warn her. There were nights I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, imagining pulling Clara aside to tell her that Julian wasn't the man she thought he was, that those friends weren't sincere, that I saw the dishonesty in their eyes. But every time I was about to speak, I remembered Clara's smile, that of a girl lost in love. "Mom, Julian loves me. Don't worry," she would say, and I chose to remain silent. I thought perhaps Clara needed to discover the truth for herself. I was wrong. My silence, my doubts, allowed the cracks in my daughter's marriage to grow wider and wider. After the wedding, Julian dragged Clara into his world, a world filled with camera flashes, lavish parties, and precisely calculated smiles. I remember the first time I accompanied my daughter to one of Julian's events, the launch of a protein powder brand for which he was a spokesman. The entire hall was flooded with dazzling lights, the music blasted non-stop, and Julian was at the center of the crowd, surrounded like a true star. He wore a custom-tailored suit. His confident smile made it impossible for anyone to look away. But from a corner of the room, I only saw Clara, my daughter, lost in a pearl-colored silk dress that she had designed herself. That dress, with its careful seams and delicate floral motifs, was the fruit of Clara's effort, but no one noticed. Everyone looked at Julian, took pictures of him, asked for his autograph, while Clara stood beside him like a faded shadow. I saw Julian take Clara's hand, but not with the tenderness of a husband. He only did it when a photographer asked for a happy family photo. "Smile, Clara," he whispered, his tone more of a command than an endearment. Clara smiled, but I knew that smile wasn't real. It was forced, as if she were trying to uphold the perfect image Julian wanted to project to the world. When the flashes died down, Julian immediately let go of Clara's hand and turned to shake hands with a sponsor, laughing and talking as if she didn't exist. I stood there, clutching my purse tightly, my heart in pieces. I wanted to pull Clara out of that place, to tell her she was worth so much more, but I just stood still, watching my daughter sink into her husband's false glow. The next day, as I was scrolling through the news online, my heart ached again. The headlines read, "Julian King, the fitness star, the family man, the inspiration for a new generation." The photos accompanying the articles showed Julian in the midst of the crowd with a radiant smile, but Clara, if she appeared at all, was just a cropped corner of the image. I stared at my phone screen, feeling as if someone were squeezing my chest. Clara, the girl who once dreamed of being a renowned fashion designer, was now just an overshadowed figure next to her husband. I wanted to call her, to ask if she was truly happy, but I was afraid that her answer would be just another lie to hide her pain. Julian's life revolved around live streams, where he taught exercise routines, advertised protein powder, and showed off his expensive sneakers. One time, I went to visit Clara and found that their living room had been turned into a small studio. There were powerful lights, hanging microphones, and backdrops with sponsor logos everywhere. Julian was in front of the camera, his voice full of energy. "Join my 30-day challenge. You'll see how your body changes." I stood at the doorway, watching Clara moving quickly in the kitchen, preparing dinner with the care I knew was for Julian. She brought out a plate of barbecue ribs, delicious and well-presented, but Julian barely glanced at it and grumbled, "Just leave it there, I'm live." Clara stood there, holding the plate, her smile slowly fading. I wanted to scream, to tell Julian he didn't deserve my daughter's sacrifice, but I just remained silent, took Clara's hand, and led her to the kitchen. "Eat with me, honey," I said, trying to sound gentle. She nodded, but her eyes were empty, as if a part of her was no longer there. The presence of Chloe, Brooke, and Maya became increasingly intense in Clara's life. They came to Julian's condo almost every day, bringing expensive gifts and endless flattery. Chloe, with her shiny blonde hair and perfect smile, used to bring boxes of cosmetics from her spa, talking nonstop about brand collaboration ideas with Julian. "If you open a spa, I'll invest immediately," she'd say with a sweet voice but a cold gaze. Brooke, in her expensive office suits, always talked about the multi-million-dollar houses she had just sold, but her eyes never left the luxury watch on Julian's wrist. "You look so elegant in this, Julian," she said, gently touching his hand. And Maya, with her phone always ready to record stories, called Julian the king of fitness and wouldn't stop taking pictures of him for her Instagram posts. "All the women in America are going crazy for you," she laughed suggestively. Clara was just there, smiling forcibly, as if trying to convince herself that everything was fine. I saw the phoniness in their every gesture, the smiles, the compliments. It was all a carefully staged play. I wanted to talk to Clara, to tell her that those friends weren't sincere, that Julian wasn't the husband she thought he was. But every time I was about to open my mouth, Clara would hug me and say, "Mom, they just want to help Julian. I believe them," and I would fall silent, like a coward, fearing the truth would hurt her more. One time, Julian invited the whole group to dinner at a luxurious restaurant in downtown Austin. I went with Clara, partly because she insisted, and partly because I wanted to observe. The restaurant's atmosphere was filled with a warm light, the clinking of wine glasses, and the aroma of high-end cuisine in the air. Julian sat at the head of the table, like a king, surrounded by Chloe, Brooke, and Maya. Chloe poured him wine, flirtatiously. "If you open another spa, I'll put money in right away. We're going to achieve something big, right?" Brooke patted him on the shoulder and let out a laugh. "You're a man who knows how to make everything perfect." Maya was busy recording a TikTok, posting with the caption, "With the man who makes all the women in America run to the gym." Clara sat beside him, in a simple dress she had sewn herself, smiling naively, as if she didn't realize she was being left out. I looked at her and my heart broke. I felt like I was watching an elaborate play where Clara was the only spectator who didn't know she was being deceived. One Friday night, my phone buzzed and I heard Clara's excited voice, like that of a little girl. "Mom, I cooked a bunch of delicious things. Come have dinner with us." I felt the excitement in her voice, something rare in recent months, and I couldn't say no. I put on a light sweater, brought a bottle of fresh squeezed lemonade, and drove to Clara and Julian's condo. On the way, I kept telling myself that maybe things were getting better, that perhaps Julian had learned to value my daughter, but deep down, a bad feeling tightened in my chest. Upon entering the condo, the aroma of barbecue ribs mixed with the freshness of a corn chowder that Clara had carefully prepared. The table was set with colorful ceramic plates that Clara had picked out at a local artisan market one weekend. She wore her favorite navy blue dress, her hair was tied back, and her eyes sparkled like they did when she was still a young dreamer. "Mom, I want tonight to be special," she said in a soft but hopeful voice. I smiled, hugging her while trying to hide the growing worry inside me. I knew Julian wasn't someone who valued these details, but still, for Clara's sake, I wished tonight would be different. The clock struck 8, then 9. The table remained untouched. The candles Clara had lit were beginning to burn down. I sat across from her. I tried to tell old stories from my youth to liven up the atmosphere, but Clara's gaze never left her phone. She called Julian once, then again, but no one answered. Finally, a short, dry message appeared on the screen. "I'm busy meeting with a partner. Don't bother me." Clara read the message, pressed her lips together, but still tried to force a smile. "He must be really busy, Mom," she said, her voice trembling as if trying to convince herself. I squeezed Clara's hand gently, but inside, a flame of anger began to burn. After 10 o'clock at night, the front door burst open. Julian stumbled in, his hair a mess, and he was enveloped in a strange perfume, not Clara's. He glanced at the table, then looked at Clara, showing no remorse. Clara stood up, approached him, trying to stay calm. "Did you forget about the dinner I prepared?" Julian frowned. He answered gruffly, Don't bother me with that nonsense. I'm closing a big deal, don't you understand? He ignored Clara. He went straight to the living room. He collapsed onto the sofa and started scrolling through his phone as if nothing was wrong. I sat there, watching my daughter's heart shatter into pieces. Clara stood motionless, clutching the edges of her skirt, but she still tried to smile forcefully. It's okay, Mom. He must be really busy. I wanted to scream. I wanted to lunge forward and slap Julian. I wanted to ask him why he treated my daughter this way, but seeing Clara's face, seeing how she tried to cling to her faith in the man she loved, the words got stuck in my throat. I just had Clara sit down and whispered, "Eat with me, honey. The food is delicious. Don't let it go to waste." We ate in silence, but every bite seemed to get stuck in my throat. I knew that a crack had opened that night, and it would never close again. The next morning, I woke up with a heavy feeling in my chest. Clara was still asleep in the living room, her phone glowing beside her. I didn't mean to look, but a notification from Maya's Instagram caught my eye. I opened it and felt my heart stop. Maya's story showed the group Julian, Chloe, Brooke, and Maya at a crowded bar the night before. Julian was holding a cocktail, laughing and talking animatedly, while Chloe and Brooke sat very close, their eyes gleaming like predators. Maya added the caption, "A night for the stars." I stared at the screen and felt as if ice water had been thrown on me. Was that the big deal Julian was talking about? Was that the reason he had stood Clara up, ignoring the dinner she had prepared with so much effort? Clara woke up and saw me with her phone in my hand. She swiped to the story, and for a moment her face went pale. But then, as if by reflex, Clara quickly turned off the screen, her voice trembling. "They probably just ran into each other by chance, Mom?" I looked at her, saw her eyes trying to hide the pain, and I couldn't take it anymore. I wanted to scream. I wanted to point at the screen and say that Julian wasn't worth anything, that he was cheating on her right in front of her eyes. But looking at Clara's face, seeing how she clung to a faint hope, I couldn't say anything. The words caught in my throat, and I just hugged her, letting her rest her head. That night, Clara asked to sleep over at my house. She lay in the old bed, squeezing my hand in the darkness, her weak voice whispering, "Mom, is it my fault? Am I not good enough for him to stay with me?" Clara's question was like a knife stabbing into my heart. I wanted to tell her no, that it wasn't her fault, that Julian wasn't worth it. But I just held her tight, feeling her small body tremble in my arms. "You are the most wonderful thing in my life," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Never think you're not enough." But inside, a fire of rage was burning fiercely. I had let Clara suffer for too long. I had allowed those cracks to grow wider and wider, and if I didn't do something, they were going to destroy my daughter's life. After many sleepless nights, I decided to seek out Leah, the young receptionist at Julian's gym. I remembered her from a few years back when I helped her mother pay for surgery expenses. She had always been grateful to me, and I hoped that gratitude would help me find a way. I arranged to meet her in a corner of the local market near my house, where the smell of fresh tortillas and the shouts of vendors filled the air. Leah arrived, her eyes bright but filled with worry. I got straight to the point, my voice low but firm. "Leah, I need to know the truth about Julian. I know you work at his gym. Is there anything strange you can tell me?" Leah looked down, nervously twisting her fingers. "Eleanor, I don't want to get into trouble, but I know you're a good person. There are some things at the gym that I think you should know." She hesitated for a moment, then continued. "The VIP lounge has security cameras. I can copy a video for you, but you have to promise me you won't say I gave it to you." I nodded, my heart grateful but also heavy with guilt. I didn't want to drag Leah into this, but I had no other choice. "Thank you, Leah," I said, placing my hand on her shoulder. "You're helping me save my daughter." A few days later, I met Leah at a small coffee shop on the outskirts of Austin, where no one knew us. Discreetly, she handed me a tiny USB drive, her eyes filled with fear but also determination. "Please, take care of yourself," Leah murmured before leaving. I held the USB in my hand, feeling it as heavy as if it carried the entire world. Driving back home, I went slowly, my mind spinning over what I was about to discover. I knew that whatever was on there would change everything. Not just for Clara, but also for me. the mother who had let her daughter be lost for too long. That night, in the quiet of my room, I plugged the USB into the computer. The blue light from the screen illuminated my face, and I felt my heart beat so hard it felt like it would break. The first images appeared, and I had to clench my fists to keep from screaming. Julian and Chloe, in the empty gym, hugging as if no one else in the world existed. In the next scene, Julian was holding Brooke's hand, admiring the new watch she was wearing, his eyes gleaming like a predator's. Then, a photo where Julian was kissing Maya on the cheek, both of them smiling conspiratorially, as if sharing a forbidden secret. But the worst was the audio recording. Julian's voice came through, cold and cruel. "Clara believes everything. She's just a shadow in the house." Chloe's sharp laughter cut through the air. "That poor thing is so naive, it's pathetic. We're your real inspiration, right?" Brooke chimed in with a proud tone. "Of course, she'll never dare to suspect anything." And Maya, with that high-pitched voice I had always thought was harmless, finished it off. "Imagine your husband and your best friends turning you into a joke, and you don't even realize it." I gripped the arms of the chair tightly, feeling my nails dig into my palms. My heart was shattered and filled with hatred. They hadn't just betrayed Clara, they had turned her into a mockery, a shadow trampled by all of them. I sat there, in the darkness, feeling my whole world collapse. I thought of Clara, of the times she laughed saying Julian loved her, of the nights she prepared dinner for him only to receive his indifference in return. I thought of myself, of the times I chose to stay silent, believing Clara would eventually realize the truth. I was wrong, and now these images and sounds were a cruel reminder of my mistake. I wanted to smash the computer, to erase those disgusting images. But I knew this was what I needed to save Clara. The next day, I gave the USB drive to Clara. She was sitting in the living room, silently sewing a new dress, her hands moving slowly as if trying to hold on to a little bit of peace. I placed the USB on the table, my voice trembling. "Clara, you have to see this." She looked at me, her eyes full of distrust, but she took the drive anyway and plugged it into her laptop. I sat beside her. I took her hand, trying to give her a strength I wasn't even sure I had. The images appeared, and I saw Clara's hands begin to shake. When the scene of Julian and Chloe embracing came on, she squeezed my hand tightly, her breathing becoming ragged. When it got to the part where Julian kissed Maya on the cheek, Clara broke down into uncontrollable sobs, burying her face on the table. "It can't be. Mom, this can't be true," she murmured between sobs, her voice broken. I just remained silent. I placed my hand on her shoulder, feeling her small body tremble again and again. I wanted to say something, to comfort her, but I knew no words could ease that pain. Clara lifted her head, her eyes red, her gaze desperate as if clinging to a fragile hope. "Maybe they were just joking, right, Mom?" she asked, her voice as weak as a lost child's. I looked into her eyes and saw her entire world crumbling. I wanted to tell her no, that it was the truth, that Julian and those supposed friends had betrayed her, but I just shook my head, my voice choked. "I'm sorry, honey. I didn't protect you." Clara hugged me, crying, and I held her tight, feeling my own heart bleed. In the following days, Clara became quiet, like a ghost, avoiding any mention of the horrible images on the USB drive. I saw the dark circles under her eyes, the traces of entire nights spent crying in silence, and every time she tried to force a smile, my heart broke. I knew Clara was trying to piece together a world where Julian was still a loving husband, but the truth was already etched in her mind, like a scar that could never be erased. I just wanted to hold her and help her escape this nightmare. But I knew that for Clara to truly wake up, she needed a stronger blow, an undeniable truth, exposed for all to see. One morning, Clara walked into the living room with her phone in her hand, her voice weak but forcing some enthusiasm. "Mom, Julian is hosting a big event in Austin. He wants me to go with him to maintain the family image for the public." I looked into her eyes and saw the doubt, as if she were trying to convince herself that there was still a chance to save her marriage. I wanted to refuse, to tell her that Julian didn't deserve her effort, but seeing her pleading gaze, I couldn't say no. "All right, I'll go with you," I replied, my voice low but firm. Inside, I knew this could be the opportunity for Clara to face the truth, even if it hurt more than anything. On the night of the event, the auditorium in downtown Austin was glowing with lights. Upbeat music played, mixed with the voices and laughter of the crowd. I stood next to Clara, feeling her hand squeezing mine, as if seeking support. Clara wore a silver dress she had designed herself. The stage lights reflected off every seam, but her eyes were filled with worry. I looked around and saw familiar faces from the world of influencers, sponsors with dazzling smiles, and cameras pointed in every direction. Then Julian came out, elegant in an expensive black suit, with a confident smile like a star's. But what made my heart stop was the person by his side, Maya, in a fire-red dress, holding onto Julian's arm affectionately, as if they were the perfect couple. The room started to whisper. Curious glances and murmurs spread like waves. I looked at Clara and saw her freeze, her face as pale as paper. "Mom," Clara whispered, her voice trembling, but before I could say anything, she stood up and walked towards the stage. The crowd parted, leaving Clara exposed, small but determined. Her voice broke, but it was clear. "Julian, what are you doing?" I saw people's gazes turn to Clara, some sympathetic, others curious, but all waiting for Julian's reaction. Julian smirked, his eyes cold. He leaned into the microphone, his voice loud enough for the entire auditorium to hear. "You're just my shadow, Clara. Don't embarrass me in front of everyone." His words were like a knife that cut the air and plunged the room into silence. I felt my blood run cold. The sympathetic gazes of the crowd fell on Clara, and I saw her standing rooted to the spot, her face drained of color. Her legs trembled, and suddenly, Clara swayed and collapsed to the floor. I ran to her and screamed desperately, "Call 911! Somebody call for an ambulance!" The crowd stirred, and some people ran to find medical staff. I knelt beside Clara. I held her, feeling her small, cold body in my arms. "Clara, honey, wake up," I whispered, my voice choked. Julian remained on the stage. His gaze brushed over us as if none of this concerned him. Maya, still holding his arm, smiled forcibly, as if trying to maintain her composure for the cameras. I looked at them, filled with rage, but at that moment, all that mattered was Clara, protecting her. The medical staff arrived quickly, checked Clara, and concluded she was in psychological shock and exhausted. They took her to a temporary rest area, and I sat by her side, holding her hand tightly. Clara lay with her eyes closed, her breathing shallow. I gently stroked her hair and whispered, "I'm here, my love. I won't let anyone hurt you again." But deep down, I knew that this wound would not heal easily. Julian's words in front of hundreds of people were not just a betrayal, but a public humiliation. I felt as if I were being torn apart too, as if I had failed to protect my daughter. On the way home, after Clara received medical attention and regained consciousness, she remained motionless in the car seat, not saying a word. I drove through the silent streets of Austin with a heavy heart. I wanted to say something, to comfort Clara, but I knew that no words could ease that pain right now. When we got home, I helped Clara sit on the sofa and made her a cup of hot tea. I thought she would cry, that she would fall apart, but to my surprise, Clara sat up. Her eyes were dry, without a single tear. Her voice was hoarse, but it sounded hard in a terrifying way. "Mom, I'm not going to cry anymore. I've seen enough. We're going to end this together." I looked into Clara's eyes, and for the first time in so many months, I saw a flame in her gaze. It wasn't weakness, it wasn't pain, but rage and determination. I took Clara's hand, squeezed it tightly, and felt the strength rising in her. "All right, my love," I said, my voice firm. "Mom will be with you, no matter what." At that moment, I knew that my Clara had truly woken up. She was no longer the naive girl who believed in fairy tales, but a woman ready to face the truth, however cruel it might be. After the shock of the event, Clara moved back in with me to the old house in Austin. The house, with its faded walls and dry potted succulents in the yard, seemed to become her final refuge. I watched Clara every day. She spoke less, but her gaze was no longer empty. Instead, a latent flame burned in those eyes, as if suffering had forged a new Clara stronger, more determined. She immersed herself in designing new dress patterns. The stitches were a way to keep her mind from sinking into darkness. One afternoon, as the red sunset covered Austin, I sat across from Clara in the living room. She was sketching a dress. Her hands moved slowly, but her gaze was distant. I took a deep breath, my voice low but steady. "Clara, to take down an arrogant man like Julian, we have to let him destroy himself. Do you dare to walk with me to the end of this path?" Clara looked up and met my eyes directly. In that instant, I saw a determination I had never seen before. She nodded firmly, her voice low but unwavering. "I want to end this, Mom. I'm tired of living in the dark." Clara's words fanned the flame inside me even brighter. I knew it was time to act. I thought of Dr. Samuel Bennett, an old friend from when I worked at the jewelry store. Samuel is a dedicated doctor, but also someone who understands how this world works. I met with him in his small office on the outskirts of the city, where the smell of disinfectant mixed with the aroma of strong coffee. As I sat down, I got straight to the point. "Samuel, I need your help. I want to sponsor a men's health campaign at Julian's gym. Everything must be legal, but the interpretation of the results needs a little emphasis to create pressure." I looked him in the eye, knowing I was asking for something complicated. He thought for a moment, his fingers gently tapping the table, and then he sighed. "Eleanor, I know you're doing this for Clara. I'll help you, but we have to be careful. We can't let anyone suspect a thing." I nodded, feeling like we had crossed a line of no return. "Thank you, Samuel," I said, my voice breaking. "This is the only way to save her." I knew that for this plan to work, I needed someone on the inside, and Leah, the receptionist at Julian's gym, was the key. I sought out Leah again, in a hidden corner of the market, where the noise of the crowd masked our conversation. "Leah, I need you to help me one more time," I said, my voice low but firm. "Tell Julian that there's a company that wants to sponsor all the expenses for a free medical checkup campaign at the gym. Emphasize that this will help promote his image." Leah nodded, her eyes shining. "I understand, Eleanor. I'll do it. Julian won't be able to turn down this opportunity." I smiled. I placed my hand on her shoulder. "You are a savior to me and my daughter, Leah." Just as I had predicted, when Leah gave him the news, Julian was immediately hooked. Upon hearing the words free and promotion, his eyes lit up like a predator's. I knew this from Clara, when she told me Julian had started bragging to Chloe, Brooke, and Maya about the golden opportunity to elevate his brand. He called the three of them to his condo, excited. "You'll see, this campaign is going to take my name to another level." Clara told me this, and inside, I felt a cold satisfaction. He had taken the bait, just as I planned. On the day of the event, a modern mobile clinic was parked right in front of Julian's gym. The van was equipped with state-of-the-art medical equipment, bearing the logo of a fake company that Samuel and I had invented. Julian, dressed in luxury sportswear, was proudly live-streaming on Instagram, talking about caring for the community's health. He stood before the crowd with a radiant smile. "Today is a special day. We're bringing you the opportunity to get a free medical checkup because I believe that health is the foundation of success." Chloe, Brooke, and Maya were there, applauding, taking pictures, and posting stories as if they were all part of this glittering theater. I stood quietly in a corner, under a tree, observing every smug face that entered the screening room. I saw Julian chatting with the doctors, Chloe flirting to get pictures next to him, and Brooke and Maya fighting to appear near him on camera. I clenched my fist, my heart beating fast but steady. This was the first step, and I couldn't fail. A week later, the test results were sent out. Samuel, just as we planned, wrote the reports with ambiguous but warning-filled medical language. Julian received his notification. Signs consistent with possible HPV infection detected. Immediate treatment is required, and you must inform all recent partners to get tested. Chloe, Brooke, and Maya also received similar reports, with phrases like risk of contagion and abnormal parameters, accompanied by the recommendation to undergo more in-depth examinations. The results weren't false. Samuel made sure everything was legal, but the way they were presented sowed a devastating fear in their hearts. I knew this was the moment the truth would start to do its work. That night, Clara was by my side, quietly drinking tea, when her phone lit up. A message from Julian appeared on the screen. "Go get tested now. I might have infected you. I'm going to the hospital now too. Please don't tell anyone about this." I looked at Clara, expecting a reaction, a cry, a denial, or a fit of rage. But she just read the message with a slight smile on her lips. "He's scared now, Mom," Clara said, her voice calm but icy. She placed the phone on the table without replying. I looked at her and saw the strength in her eyes. I knew then that she was ready to face whatever storm was coming. A few days after the Men's Health campaign, rumors began to spread among the influencers of Austin. There was quiet talk of an outbreak of sexually transmitted diseases in the fitness world. They appeared in group chats, forums, and even in cryptic posts on Instagram. A famous blogger, whom I had met at one of Julian's events, posted a text with a sharp tone. "Be careful with those shiny lifestyles promoted on social media, because behind the stage lights, there are health risks no one imagines." No names were mentioned, but everyone knew the arrow was aimed at Julian and his group of friends. I was in the living room, scrolling through these posts on my phone, with the feeling of a fire burning inside me. It was the beginning, but I knew that to make Julian and Clara's best friends truly pay, I needed much more. Leah, the receptionist at Julian's gym, once again proved to be a great ally. She sent me more videos from the gym's security cameras, clips she had secretly copied before finishing her shift. I received them one afternoon, as the golden sun streamed through the window, illuminating the small living room. I plugged the USB into the computer, and the images made my heart pound. One video showed Julian and Chloe joking around too much in the gym, she laughing as he wrapped his arm around her waist. Another recorded Brooke's voice whispering to Julian in a corner. "Clara will never find out, don't worry." But the video that made my blood boil the most was of Maya, with a smug smile, telling Julian, "That guy only sees his wife as an accessory for the family photo." How pathetic. They also mocked Julian's fans, calling them easily deceived fanatics. I clenched my fist tightly, my nails digging into my palm. These videos weren't just evidence, they were a brutal indictment of the betrayal Clara was suffering. I knew I needed someone with enough influence to bring this evidence to light. And I immediately thought of Victoria, a well-known influencer who had been a declared enemy of Julian. He had publicly criticized her on social media, calling her jealous when she questioned the transparency of his advertising contracts. I contacted her through a mutual friend, and we met at a small coffee shop on the outskirts of the city. When I handed her the USB, I told her bluntly, "Victoria, you know what kind of person Julian is. What's on here will help you unmask him, but I want you to do it for Clara, for a girl betrayed by him and her friends." Victoria looked at me with sharp but empathetic eyes. "Eleanor, I'll do it. Not just for me, but for everyone Julian has deceived." I nodded, feeling like I was entrusting part of Clara's fate into her hands. Victoria did not disappoint. A few days later, she uploaded a 10-minute video on Instagram and YouTube titled "The Truth Behind the Shine of Fitness King, Julian King." The video began with images of Julian on stage, giving speeches about health and morality, and then cut to the clips from the USB. Julian hugging Chloe, laughing with Brooke, kissing Maya on the cheek, and all those cruel phrases sounding clearly. Victoria mixed it all with a biting commentary. "This is the true face of the man you all admire. A guy who betrays his wife and turns her into a joke along with some fake friends." She never mentioned Clara by name, but everyone knew who she was talking about. The video closed with a question. "Would you really continue to believe in the shine of people like this?" The video exploded. In just one day, it surpassed 1 million views, and thousands of furious comments appeared. "What a disgrace, a cheater giving lectures on morality. Poor wife, living next to a nest of vipers. Unfollowing immediately." I sat next to Clara, watching her scroll through the comments, her gaze calm but a slight smile at the corner of her lips. I knew she was feeling the first taste of justice after so many months of pain. Brands quickly turned their backs on Julian. A sneaker brand, which had previously paid him millions of dollars, issued an official statement. "We are ceasing our collaboration with Julian King due to scandals of a moral character." Other advertising contracts were also canceled one after another. Julian's Instagram account, which had hundreds of thousands of followers, began to lose tens of thousands each day. He made desperate live streams to justify himself, shouting with a flushed face, "I was set up. It's all a lie. They're destroying my life." But the more he explained, the more he sank into public ridicule. A pinned comment on his stream read, "If you're innocent, why don't you face your wife?" I looked at Clara, saw her read that comment, and for the first time, I noticed a spark in her eyes. Meanwhile, at home, Clara was by my side, drinking a cup of hot tea. She looked out the window, where the dim moonlight illuminated the potted succulents. "I've never seen him so desperate," Clara murmured, her voice low but sharp. "But this is just the beginning, right, Mom?" I nodded, placing my hand on hers. "That's right, honey. Our show is just raising the curtain." A cold satisfaction rose within me. I wasn't happy to have brought Julian to this point, but I didn't regret it. He and his friends had hurt Clara, turned her into a mockery, and now they were facing the consequences alone. After Victoria's video reached millions of views, Julian's career crumbled like a sandcastle before the tide. His Instagram account, which once had hundreds of thousands of followers, was now losing tens of thousands every day. Critical comments and hashtags like #JulianKingFake spread across all social media platforms. Brands canceled contracts, advertisements disappeared, and Julian, once hailed as the king of fitness, was now just the target of ridicule. I scrolled through the posts, reading the comments filled with indignation. "Hypocrite. Poor wife. She didn't deserve to be treated like that." Each line was a stab at Julian's reputation, but I knew he wouldn't give up so easily. One night, while Clara and I were in the living room, the light from the old television illuminated her face. Clara was checking her phone, and suddenly she looked up, her voice calm but significant. "Mom, Julian is about to go live. He says he's going to clear everything up." I looked at her, noticing a glint of determination in her eyes that I had never seen before. "Do you want to watch it?" I asked in a low, concerned voice. Clara nodded with a slight smile. "I want to see how he tries to save himself." We turned on the television, connecting to Julian's live stream, and I felt my heart pound. I knew this would be a decisive moment. The stream began, and I saw Julian appear alongside Chloe, Brooke, and Maya. 4 tired faces, with reddened eyes, trying to play the victims in front of thousands of viewers. Julian was in the center, his voice trembling but trying to maintain his confidence. "We are being slandered. I never betrayed my family. Those videos are fake, a plot to ruin my career." Chloe sobbed, drying her tears with a tissue. "We're just friends, but they slandered us." Brooke nodded, her voice weak. "We didn't do anything wrong." Maya, with a forced smile, added, "Please, believe us. Don't let lies destroy our friendship." I watched them, feeling like I was watching a poorly acted play, and the flame of rage inside me reignited. Clara was sitting next to me, silently holding her phone. She quickly typed a comment and pinned it to the top of the live stream. "If you're innocent, why don't you dare to face your wife face to face? Julian, I'm right here." Clara's comment was like a bomb. The television screen filled with messages of support. "That's right. Face her. Clara's right. Don't hide." The hashtag number #LiveWithClara instantly started trending, spreading like wildfire. I looked at Clara, saw her sitting up straight, her gaze cold but determined. "You did very well," I whispered, squeezing her hand. Clara barely smiled, but I knew she was ready for a final battle. Cornered, Julian had no choice. He pressed the accept button, and the stream screen split in two. On one side were the 4 guilty faces, their eyes filled with panic, and on the other, Clara, serene, sitting next to me in the simple living room of our old house. She wore a simple white shirt, her hair pulled back, but her eyes radiated a strength I had never seen in her. Clara looked directly at the camera, her voice clear. "Hello, everyone. I'm Clara, and this is my mother, Eleanor." The atmosphere of the stream grew dense, as if the entire world were holding its breath. Following Clara's signal, I turned on the computer and played the recordings and videos that Leah had given us. Julian's voice came through, cold and cruel. "Clara is just a shadow. Then the scene of him hugging Chloe in the gym, kissing Maya on the cheek in a selfie, and laughing with Brooke as she showed off her new watch. Every video, every word, was a blow that shattered Julian's shiny facade. The audience erupted, comments flooding the screen. Disgusting. Traitor. I looked at Clara, saw her sitting firmly, not looking away from the camera, as if she were facing the whole world. Then Clara spoke, her voice firm and cutting. "Thank you, Julian. Thanks to you, I realized I deserve better. I've lived in the dark for too long, but now I see your true face, and the faces of those friends I once trusted." Her words sounded like a declaration, powerful and unbreakable. I squeezed her hand tightly, feeling the firmness in those small fingers. I felt proud, but also pained, because I knew that to say that, Clara had endured so much pain. On the other side of the screen, the faces of Julian, Chloe, Brooke, and Maya were pale as death. Julian stammered, trying to say something, but his voice broke. This is fake. Chloe burst into tears, but no one believed those fake tears. Brooke and Maya bowed their heads, unable to look at the camera. Finally, in a panic, they ended the stream. But it was too late. Thousands of people had screen recorded it, and those videos spread rapidly across all social media, like a tsunami washing away what was left of Julian's reputation. 2 weeks after the live stream, Clara came to me in the living room, a sheaf of papers in her hand. "Mom, I've decided," she said, her voice firm but with a slight tremor. "I'm going to file for divorce. I don't want to live one more day in Julian's shadow." I looked into her eyes and saw a strength I had never seen in her before. I took her hand, squeezing it tightly. "I support you, Clara. We'll get through this together." A mix of relief and worry grew inside me. I knew the trial wouldn't be easy, but I also knew it was necessary for Clara to get her life back. On the day of the hearing, the atmosphere in the courtroom was as heavy as a gathering storm. Julian entered, gaunt and alone, with no trace of the fitness king who had once mesmerized all of Austin. His face was sunken, his eyes dull, and the expensive suit now hung loosely on his frame. Chloe, Brooke, and Maya, the inseparable friends who were always by his side, had completely vanished from his life, as if they had never existed. I sat next to Clara, holding her hand and feeling its slight tremor, but there was no longer fear in her eyes. It was the gaze of a woman ready to face her past and move forward. Julian's lawyer, a middle-aged man with a slick smile, stood up and presented a petition that made my blood run cold. "Your Honor," he said confidently, "we request half of the $4 million from the wife's family estate, as it constitutes community property from the marriage between Mr. Julian King and Mrs. Miss Clara King." I felt my blood stop. They had investigated the fortune I had accumulated over years of jewelry trading and land investments, and now they wanted to snatch it away, as if everything they had already taken from Clara wasn't enough. I looked at Julian, who kept his head down, but with a slight smirk on his lips, as if he still believed he could win. Clara's lawyer, James, an old friend I trusted, just smiled gently. He stood up, his voice deep but sharp. "Your Honor, the $4 million belongs solely to Mrs. Eleanor, the mother of Mrs. Clara King. It was accumulated over 20 years ago through Mrs. Eleanor's jewelry business and land investments, long before Clara married Mr. Julian King. We have all the documentation to support this, including land purchase agreements, transaction receipts, and accounting ledgers." James presented a thick file to the court, each page meticulously organized, leaving no room for doubt. I looked at Julian and saw his smile vanish, his face turning pale. The judge, an older woman with a stern gaze, reviewed the documents carefully. The silence in the room was so intense I could hear my own heartbeat. Clara, beside me, squeezed my hand, breathing steadily, though I knew she was holding back her emotions. Finally, the judge's gavel struck with a sharp crack, sounding like thunder. "The petition for division of assets from Mr. Julian King is denied," she declared in a clear voice. "A divorce is granted to Mrs. Clara King, and Mr. Julian King will receive no alimony." Julian collapsed in his seat, his face as white as paper, his gaze empty. He left the courtroom empty-handed, without a word, without a single glance in our direction. When we walked out of the courthouse, the bright Austin sun illuminated Clara's face. She took a deep breath, as if she had just released a weight she had been carrying for years. I hugged Clara and whispered, "You did it, my love." Clara smiled, a real smile, no longer forced. "Thank you, Mom," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "If it weren't for you, I don't know how I would have gotten through this." I squeezed her hand tightly, feeling the strength Clara had regained. A rare peace awoke within me, as if those years of pain had finally come to a close. A few months later, Clara launched her own fashion brand in a small boutique in downtown Austin. I stood at a distance, watching her on that special day, dressed in a design of her own, a pearl-colored silk dress with delicate floral motifs, like a declaration of rebirth. Clara's smile was radiant, confident, and her eyes shone like the Sunday. My daughter's true friends, the ones who didn't appear in Julian's false glow, came to congratulate her, bringing bouquets of fresh flowers. I saw Leah, the receptionist who had once helped us, smiling from a corner as Clara hugged her warmly. Victoria, the one who brought the truth to light, was also there, handing Clara a bouquet of white daisies and whispering something that made Clara laugh. I stood still, watching Clara receive congratulations, my heart light and calm. I thought about our journey, from the days I remained silent, letting her get lost in Julian's fake world, to the days we fought together to bring the truth to light. I thought about the trial, about the moment Clara stood tall, no longer anyone's shadow, and I thought about myself. A mother who believed she was powerless, but who ultimately found the strength to protect her daughter. The sweetest revenge, I understood, is not to destroy the other person, but to let the truth reveal itself, and from those ashes, see the person you love most be reborn. I looked at Clara, watching her converse with the guests, with that smile as luminous as the sun, and I knew she had reclaimed her essence. That night, returning to the old house, I sat by the window, looking at the dry, potted succulents under the moonlight. I whispered to myself, "Eleanor, you did it. For Clara, you didn't give up." A complete peace spread within me, and I knew that although the road ahead might still be long, Clara and I would walk it together, with all the strength and love we have. After everything we've been through, I just want to leave a message. True happiness is never built on lies and betrayal. When we remain silent in the face of wrongdoing, when we close our eyes to cling to an illusion, the pain only accumulates. Only by facing the truth, only by letting go of those who don't deserve us, do we find our worth again. My daughter's story and mine is a reminder that everyone must learn to protect themselves, not to let their trust be used against them, and that justice, though it may take time, always finds a way to come to light. Love, but with awareness. Trust, but without forgetting to protect your dignity and inner strength. The story you have just heard has had names and locations changed to protect the identity of the people involved. We do not tell this to judge, but in the hope that someone will listen and stop to reflect. How many mothers are suffering in silence within their own homes? I truly wonder. If you were in my place, what would you do? Would you choose to remain silent to keep the peace, or would you dare to face it all to reclaim your voice? I want to know your opinion, because every story is like a candle that can light someone else's path. God always blesses, and I am convinced that courage leads us to better days. Meanwhile, on the final screen, I leave you with two of the channel's most beloved stories. I'm sure they will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment.